Due Process, recipient of 2 Mid-Atlantic Emmy Awards for Outstanding Talk Show Series and Outstanding Public Affairs Series.
We were able to track through auditing that an administrator was logging on at about 7 o'clock every single night. And we were further able to verify that this administrator was downloading the database that included the email, which was fully encrypted. So it's all bulletproof. We thought it was bulletproof anyway.
Crime on the internet. Our not-so-state-of-the-art legal system tries to cope, but it's an all-new area of criminal opportunity. Are corporations safe? Are we? Law on the cyber frontier on the docket for this edition of Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process is made possible by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law. Additional funding is provided by Lawyer's Diary and Manual, publishers of print and electronic information for and about the legal community, including the legislative manual.
Email, web page, cyberspace, words we hadn't heard until just a few years ago, before computers changed the way we work and the way we live. I'm Raymond Brown, and with the new technology came new quandaries, questions of ethics and privacy and limits, and even the law. Are privacy and property being redefined? Has the legal system managed to keep up? Has anything on hard drive become fair public game? We'll ask the experts in this half hour, but first, here's Sandy King with some insight on the Internet's impact on privacy and business.
Raymond, the new realities of the cyber world have altered every aspect of how we all do business, the straight side and the crooked. Take, for instance, industrial secrets, business place spies. They may once have relied on hidden cameras and wiretaps. Now they may need no more than a home PC.
Internet technology advances at the speed of light. The law relating to it advances at the speed of government.
Some people have said that cyber law is in its infancy. I think it's still in its conception.
The internet in law enforcement circles can be considered the Wild West.
It was the winter of 1996 when Paul Lewis, president and CEO of MC Squared, figured out his private email was not so private.
It was an inside job from one of the employees in the company, and the email was stolen and distributed to unauthorized users and also to competitors.
Lewis wasted no time in contacting the New Jersey State Police Computer Crimes Unit. Detective Sergeant Michael Garrity was put on the case.
We set up a surveillance at MC Squared headquarters, and we monitored what this perpetrator was doing.
Every single night he was reading through the email. He actually admitted that he wanted to see if we were talking about him behind his back. And by taking a line out of context and forwarding it to a person, it very much damaged morale within the company.
The self-appointed gatekeeper was circulating confidential messages about personnel matters to his friends within the company. He was also forwarding insider information to an MC Squared competitor. Detective Garrity spent several months building the case.
We went to the judge, and he authorized a search warrant, went to the residence of where this former employee was, and he was very surprised.
He was downloading the information to another file server, which was off-site, via a phone line.
One of the computers was actually logged in to MC Squared's network homepage at the time, so we had some good evidence.
MC Squared did the right thing immediately, which was first to recognize the problem and then to act quickly on it. And in these cases, that's extremely important because if information is stolen from your company, it can quickly, of course, be sent and multiplied.
A wide area network?
MC Squared's experience reflects a growing national problem. According to a 1997 FBI survey of 563 companies, an astonishing 75% had been victimized by computer-related crime in just the preceding year.
There are relatively few people who specialize in this area of the law. They're busy as hell trying to keep up with it.
Much of current law reflects old technologies. It then becomes a question of fitting crime to statute.
He was arrested and charged with unauthorized access to a computer system and actually a violation of the Wiretap Act because he was reading and accessing private electronic mail.
Assuming we found the law and that we've put the evidence together, the next problem is you need to find a prosecutor who is ready, willing, and able to prosecute a high-technology crime. Many prosecutors are not terribly literate in this area.
The legal system is a bit behind. They're unfamiliar with this new technology, and they're not really sure what to do with it. And also there's a kind of a romantic concept of the hacker.
The MC² employee fit the profile. In his early 20s, he was the stereotypical, introverted, extremely intelligent computer nerd. His actions, though, were anything but a hacker's prank.
We lost a number of very good salespeople. We lost a number of very good engineers. The lost revenue that we missed out by not having these salespeople in place, and contracts that we were not able to fulfill because we lost the engineers, it's easily in the millions. He actually pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts.
But the charges were downgraded and remanded to municipal court.
A theft charge and a criminal mischief charge. He was sentenced there on a plea agreement.
It was viewed as being a first offense. He did plead guilty, and all he got was community service. In essence, they slapped his wrist and they let him go.
When a computer crime occurs and an investigation is undertaken and law enforcement works on it, and the person ends up with little or no jail time, just some community service, promising not to do it again, it sends a terrible message.
So the message to cyber criminals may be, it is open season on our intellectual property. Investigators are few, resources scarce. Why spend time and money prosecuting a case like this when the result may yield little justice?
I think what throws people off is that cyberspace exists in this kind of non-physical world. And people are used to looking at documents.
Tangible value on information is hard to get across. You have to take into account the amount of work hours or man hours that were used in developing this product or information.
He was not charged with theft of data, and he was not charged with distribution of data. And that's what was harming or harmful to MC², was the theft and the distribution of the data, not the access to the data.
There is little doubt that our corporations are at risk from hackers, thieves, and disgruntled employees, but is our individual privacy under threat as well?
We are coming to grips with the problem that our entire infrastructure is based on technology. We are dependent on these systems as a society.
The internet was never designed to be a secure system. Greenhorns on the cyber frontier are just as likely to fall victim as in the Old West. Caveat emptor.
With the name and a social security number, you can see the person's entire life without the person knowing. So it is a problem, and security and privacy, I guess, go hand in hand.
When you see something on your screen, it may not be what it seems to be.
Thomas Jefferson said that information is the currency of democracy. Does information equal power? If so, is power decentralized as information becomes accessible to all? And how will this all affect our society?
The internet is still the virtual Wild West. And there is no sheriff riding the cyber plane. There's no one in charge.
Of course, the import in the workplace is just the beginning. What about the impact on our private lives? Are the laws in place to protect us there? Kind of scary to know that your whole life story might be squeezed into just a few bytes, Raymond, and turned into hard copy by even the cheapest inkjet printer.
And Sandy, when we come back, we'll see how a whole new technology may require a whole new body of law. So stay with us. How much less private are we than we used to be? What are our rights in cyberspace? How likely are we to become cyber victims? For some answers to these and other internet questions, we turn to Richard Klein, a lawyer whose client sued his wife for cyber adultery, and Jason Catlett, an internet expert on marketing and privacy and president of Junkbusters Corporations. And in Newark, Richard Field, whose Cliffside Park practice specializes in electronic commerce and its legal implications. Gentlemen, welcome. Jason, let me start with you. Are we being paranoid when we suggest people should be concerned about the gap between legal protections and the internet and the general unknown about cyberspace?
No, I think we're being very rational when we consider the fact that cyberspace is a place where your every action can be monitored and recorded and brought back and used against you.
Are most people fully aware of the extent to which there's a total awareness of the things they think they're doing in private, perhaps sitting at a terminal, even in their bedroom?
Most people are tragically unaware. For example, Oliver North thought that when he deleted his email that it would go away. It doesn't. It's backed up.
And Oliver North was a guy who, from his life experience, you would think would have an understanding of how basically how the system works.
And a good motivation, too.
That's true. Richard Klein, you're a well-known lawyer. It's likely, however, that for the rest of your career you'll be known as the cybersex lawyer.
Sad, isn't it, Ray?
But it's interesting, though, because it does take us to this area in which at least there was a person in a case, on the other side of a case, who was engaging in sexually explicit conversations and believed that she was doing it in a way that no one would ever know about.
And that's what's fascinating to me about this. When so many more people now, as they access internet providers and AOL, CompuServe, whatever it may be, assume that their conversations are truly conversations. Not true. What you and I are having now on the air is no more private than somebody sitting in their bedroom, as you mentioned before. In my particular circumstance, I have no doubt that the individual involved thought it was very private. It turned out to be very public.
And of course, for reasons that shouldn't surprise us, sex seems to drive much of the dialogue. It drove much of the congressional debate in the last year about what should or should not be allowed in terms of access. It certainly has given publicity to a case that really revolves as much around privacy and what are the circumstances between husband and wife as it does sexuality and cyberspace.
Exactly right. The other thing it does is it spawns new legislation that ostensibly is supposed to protect people, but in reality, is it protecting privacy rights or is it restricting information?
We're going to come back to the new legislation, but I first want to bring Richard Field in from Newark electronically. Richard, in terms of business, we had a report that talked about business theft. How widespread is the concern in industry, business, and commerce that computers are being used illegally? And if it's a large concern, is law enforcement really as far behind as that report suggests?
There is a terrific concern among business about the illegal use of computers by outsiders. And law enforcement has some weapons for that, some legislation and some technological weapons. But it is a severe concern. Having said that, of course, there's also a concern about privacy on the other side, the use by corporations of personal information of its users.
Jason Catlett mentioned that somebody as sophisticated as Ollie North had little understanding of the implications of his computer activities. Does the average consumer have a complete awareness of the extent to which his or her information is being picked up, disseminated by computer, and available to other people?
I think the average consumer has almost no awareness of it. It's so easy to push a button, send a message out, return a message to a listserv or disseminate it, buy something on the computer if that's what you'd like. Very easy to do, very easy to forget what happened to the other end.
Are there areas where people can be seriously disadvantaged by the fact that information is accumulated by services or people they don't know and then used against them? Everybody here is nodding. Jason?
Sure. There's a case where a Tennessee government authority was sued by a newspaper proprietor for their cookie files. Now, cookies sound innocent, but in fact what they are is a surveillance device on your own web browser that keeps a record of which sites you went to, and it's under control of
Wait a minute, you're saying in my computer at home there is a cookie that's keeping track of every place I go and that can be accessed by others?
Right, by the people who you visit on that site. Now, for example, if a porno site wants to set a cookie on your file, it can do so, and many do, and that leaves a permanent record on your hard disk that you visited this site called, for example, porn.com or whatever. And I think the fear of the people who worked for that government authority was that this information, subpoenaed under freedom of information, would be used against them, because many people make casual use of the internet and think that no record is kept of where they've been.
Now, when you say porn, I think of Richard Klein. And so in the case, in your case, yes, for example, what happened? Because I gather you were able, in a sense, to get access to the kind of information Jason said was stored in the cookie.
That's exactly right. And I'll analogize it to another case that we should probably also be talking about. In my particular case, it started out as what you said before, seemingly innocent discussions, although sexually explicit discussions. Those discussions in that particular case led to actual face-to-face meetings, so to speak, which in reality became adulterous behavior. I was able to secure, through very little effort, I might add, a court order allowing me to proceed directly from the courthouse to the individual's home computer and obtain the hard drive. And in obtaining the hard drive, obtaining over 450 pages of information which was extremely important information for my particular case, which was involved custody and divorce.
All right, let me ask you now, as a citizen, as opposed to a lawyer in the case, are you concerned at the ease with which you were able to get that court order?
I'm very concerned.
And what protections are there then for people like the person from whom you got it?
I am very concerned, and I'm concerned for one very interesting reason from the point of view of both a lawyer and an individual. I had to cite virtually no law to obtain that court order. There was very little discussion that went on. My discussion consisted of the fact that this was truly not protected information, and therefore it's accessible. That was agreed to. Now, as far as what protections, there are truly no protections going on right now at all. There's a lot of legislation pending. There's a McCain bill pending. There's other pieces of legislation pending which are supposed to provide some degree of privacy. Very interesting case, I think, is there was a case...
Let me just stop you for 1 second, though, because, Jason, my question is, having raised the cookie problem and having Richard tell us of the ease with which he was able to get that kind of information, so let's assume I'm on the net all the time and I'm not interested in the whole world knowing about my particular political interests. Suppose I have a view that's unpopular or controversial. How do I protect myself from others, government, private, or otherwise, looking at the record of where I've gone on the net and figuring out what my interests are, or who my friends are, or what my commercial needs are?
It's a full-time job, but in the case of cookies, there are some very simple solutions. You can disable cookies, which is an option in the latent model browsers, or you can get a specific product to stop them. You can also make technical changes. And all this, if people are on the web, they can visit junkbusters.com/cookies.html and read about it.
But those are technical solutions. Don't I have any legal protection? I mean, why should somebody else have the right to access, for example, no one can come into my house and determine which books I've taken down off the shelves, but yet there obviously is available, potentially, for somebody to come down and look at the cookie. Richard, let me bring Richard in from Newark, and then we'll come back. Richard?
Yes, thank you. Privacy is multifaceted. It's very interesting. You've got to start dividing up what it is you're talking about with privacy. You've got communications that you want to be sending back and forth without some hacker coming in and grabbing them in the middle. You've also got databases at the other end. Maybe the government has it. Maybe a corporation is keeping that database of your information.
Well, Richard, now you've mentioned one of my favorites, the government. I mean, the government can't do a mail cover on me, and they can't just find out what mail I've gotten, nor can they find out what calls have gone in and out of my house without going to a court first. Why is it that the government, through various ways, could get access to the places I visit on the web, and is there anything that can be done to protect me from that?
There are some practical solutions. You can try to be anonymous. You can set up an account that's anonymous. The problem with that in the long run is the internet is moving more towards an atmosphere where trust is critical.
So how about the legal protection? Is there anything that legally protects me?
You're legally protected in largest part against government intrusion. The U.S. has had some amount of history of not trusting its government with your personal life. And there are some statutes on the books that protect the Privacy Act, for example, and some others that say the government can't use some of the information that it already has about you for other purposes.
But that answer leads me to believe that I'm not protected so well from private sources.
I don't believe that you are protected very well at all from private sources. There was a case called the McVeigh versus AOL case, which you may very well be familiar with, where there was the Navy began discharge proceedings against a sailor because there was a belief that there was a violation of the don't ask, don't tell rule. And it turned out that the information was not provided by a private individual to the government. The information was provided by the server, in that case America Online, to the government. That case was tried and it was held that that was indeed a violation of privacy. But Ray, that doesn't solve your concern, my concern, and which is the individual hacker, more or less, to use terms like that, and what protection you have, not necessarily from the government. That's a slightly easier issue.
But it was really the business interest that interceded to really pass the information on. So we're back to the fact that there doesn't seem to be protection from business, and the sense I'm getting is that technology is moving so fast that technological solutions are always short-term. So we come back to the question of whether the Congress, which has not been ahead of the curve, or any other legal body can offer protection. Is it an impossible situation?
No, it's a very desperate situation, actually, and the Clinton administration is moving fast to address the widespread concerns people have for their privacy on the net. In May, the Department of Commerce is holding a series of hearings on privacy with a view to controlling or governing whatever privacy legislation is needed. And the Business Week poll last month showed that the majority of Americans do favor new legislation to protect their privacy on the internet.
Jason, let me ask Jason, in your heart of hearts, do you believe that the solution is a frantic effort to stay technologically ahead of the curve, or ultimately are we going to have to rely on some legislation somewhere that protects us?
The technology is always a catch-up game. What Americans need, I think, are protections for their basic privacy rights. I personally think that because the technology moves so fast, if the legislators try to plug little holes in the technology as they open, they're never going to get it right. What we need are the basic privacy rights that give Americans the right to know, for example, what information a company is holding about them.
Richard Field, as we wind down, are you optimistic that there is going to be some comprehensive and extremely thoughtful solution coming from the Congress to offer broad protections against privacy invasions by private business and other people on the net?
I'm partially optimistic. Comprehensive solution.
That sounds like a hedge, Richard, but okay. Tell us why you're partially optimistic.
Very difficult. There's an interesting dynamic going on. The Clinton administration, up till now, has been advocating self-regulation by corporations, trying to keep Congress from passing many laws on privacy. It's facing a lot of resistance. It's facing resistance from Congress that answers closer to the voters. It's facing resistance from consumers who are looking and saying, look, if the government's not going to protect my privacy, and we're not going to trust corporations to do it because they've got the economic incentive to data mine, to warehouse database information, then we're going to protect ourselves through the internet. And we've seen examples with LexisNexis, PTrack, Social Security, the credit card organizations, and some others, where the customers can jump right in and really play havoc with corporate planning affairs. So I think although corporations today are trying to keep government from regulating themselves, I think they may learn in the future that may be a preferable corporate planning approach to letting consumers strangle them with no warning at all.
Richard, that's a very cautious answer. Richard Klein, we're near the end. Can you give us a sense of your optimism or pessimism about the future?
I'm concerned because I think that we have to strike a balance between establishing some privacy rights but not limiting the access to that information that's out there on the internet. And the concern I have is that the legislation that has been introduced, much of the legislation has been introduced, has the effect of potentially chilling the rights of information in the guise of protecting privacy.
So you've introduced another element, balancing chilling effect versus protection, but yet offering some protection. Jason, we started with you. Let's end with you. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the ability ultimately of government and the legislature in particular to fashion meaningful solutions given the balance we're trying to strike?
Privacy is an impossible problem in the end. It will always conflict with freedom of expression. And we in America have to choose a solution that is consistent with our culture. What we have now is not protecting the fundamental desires of the American people.
So That sounds to me as though you are like Richard Fields, cautiously optimistic, but not absolutely saying you're certain it's going to happen.
I think we'll see some bad legislation before we see some good legislation.
You agree, Richard? Bad
Totally
legislation
agree.
first? So we have a lot more
Seen it
pain
already.
before we get to the mountaintop. Well, though it's only the beginning for law and cyberspace, alas, that's it for this edition of Due Process. But we hope you'll join us next week when we take on yet another issue of law and social justice. Till then, for Sandy King and all of us here at Due Process, I'm Raymond Brown.
We're going to learn to be careful. We're going to learn that there are tricksters out there. We're going to learn that just because an ad appears in a newspaper or on television or on radio doesn't absolutely mean that it's 100% accurate. We're going to have to be good consumers. We're going to have to be smart consumers. And the fact that we're doing something online doesn't give you permission to put your brain in neutral. You've got to be just as aware as you would be in a store, on a trip, anywhere else. Cyberspace, just another shopping center for the future.
Major funding for Due Process was made possible by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law. Additional funding was provided by Lawyer's Diary and Manual, publishers of print and electronic information for and about the legal community, including the legislative manual.